Hello, this is Mr. Eason with homework help for 5th grade math. We are doing a little bit of review in this lesson in which we are working on our multiplication strategies. So we're going to start by talking about a multiplication strategy for threes, and the strategy is to multiply by 2 and then add one more group. So we're going to do a quick example down here of that strategy. If we were doing, say, 6 times 3, what we would do is we could take our 6 and multiply it by 2, and then we're going to add one more group of 6 on. And since we are doing the 6 times 2 first, we're going to indicate that with parentheses. And so that would be how you would solve the 6 times 3 is by doing 6 times 2 plus 6 more. A strategy for multiplying by 4s is to multiply by 2 and then double it. I like to call this the double-double strategy because you're doubling the number and doubling it again. So an example of this strategy would be if you were doing something like 7 times 4. That's a fact that is a little bit challenging sometimes. You could do 7 times 2, which we know is 14, and then we can double 14, which is just like 14 plus 14 to get 28. And so those two expressions are equivalent, and it might be easier to do the 7 times 2 times 2 if you don't have the 7 times 4 memorized. Now we're going to move on to 6s, which is a fairly challenging fact to remember, but a really easy strategy to do because it relies on knowing your 5s. So if I want to do a number like 8 times 6, maybe students don't know how to count by 6s or 8s, but they probably know what 8 times 5 is. So we'll do 8 times 5, and then after we do 8 times 5, we're going to add one more group of 8, so we'll just add a plus 8. And that is how you do that. So 8 times 5 is 40, plus 8 more is 48. Therefore, 8 times 6 is 48. Now we'll talk about the 8s strategy. It's not my favorite, but it does work if you don't have another strategy. It's similar to the 4 strategy. In the 4 strategy, you multiply by 2 and then 2 again. In the 8s strategy, you're going to multiply by 2 3 times. Double, double, double. So if I want to do an equation like 3 times 8, obviously, I could do the 3 strategy, but we're practicing the 8s. So we're going to do 3 times 2 times 2 times 2. And we're going to do 3 times 2, which is 6, 6 times 2, which is 12, and 12 times 2, which is 24. While that is a few steps, multiplying by 2s is a fairly easy thing to do. Most students get that first, so it's going to be a fairly easy way to do 3 times 8, or any number times 8 if you're not sure about it. The last strategy we're going to talk about is multiplying by 9s. And there are lots of strategies out there for multiplying by 9s. There's ones where you're using your fingers. There's ones where you make a list of numbers going from 0 to 9 in the tens place, and then 9 to 1 in the ones place. Those are fine, but we're going to think of another way without having to write up all the steps or even using your fingers, and that is to multiply by 10 and then subtract one group. So if I'm doing a fairly challenging expression, like 7 times 9, okay, I can do 7 times 10, which is 70. And then I'm going to subtract one group, which means I'm going to subtract a 7, and I'm going to get 63. It's a fairly easy way to do 7 times 9 if you don't have that memorized already. So now we'll look at 2 examples of homework. Example 1, Corinne thinks multiplying by 3 is easy because she multiplied by 2 and then adds one more group. Write an expression using parentheses to show how Corinne multiplies 8 times 3. So we're going to use that strategy that Corinne is thinking about to help us do 8 times 3. We'll go ahead and we will write 8 times 2, and we'll put that in parentheses indicating that it comes first, and then we'll add 8 more. So 8 times 2 is 16, plus 8 more would be 24. So our answer there would be 24. We'll look at one more example and then we'll be done. Example 2. To find 9 times any number, Darren multiplies by 10 and then subtracts one group. Write an expression using parentheses to show how Darren would multiply 8 times 9. So Darren would be doing 8 times 10 because that's the strategy that he describes on top. And then he's going to subtract one group of 8. So he has 80 minus 8, which is going to be 72. Therefore, Darren gets 72 by doing 8 times 10 minus 8. using the strategy that he described above. This has been Mr. Easton with Homework Help. Good luck, and I'll see you in class tomorrow.